Okay, we're going into thoughts and stories and how they relate to sensations and how to navigate all that. I just drank a bunch of fizzy water, so I'm probably going to burp in a minute, but we'll get to that when we need to. So thoughts and stories. So when we're feeling our body and we're feeling sensations, there can be all kinds of sensations that come up, and a lot of them could be painful. And so, generally, when we feel a painful sensation, I think that most people have this natural tendency to think thoughts. And so, one, it's a way to distract ourselves from actually feeling the sensation, especially if it's very painful. And two, the thought itself is going to resonate with whatever sensation we're feeling. So if we're feeling something that's irritating, then we're going to think thoughts that are irritating, or we're going to think about people that irritate us, or the things that people do that irritate us, or situations that are, whether they're actually in our life or we're just kind of making them up, situations that irritate us, or we'll have stories of irritable situations. Um, if we're feeling an exhausted sort of feeling, like we're feeling like it's almost hard to breathe and we're just tired, then we're going to think resonant thoughts with that too. Um, so the practice is we're feeling our breath, we're feeling the sensations as they come and go, and our mind is going to naturally, well, habitually wander into thoughts and stories and reveries. And so, what we need to do is every time we notice ourselves doing that, is to come back to the sensation and come back to the breath and just feel. And every time our mind wanders again or we start thinking things, we'll just come back to the breathing and the sensations. And so this could take a while to get used to doing and to kind of strengthen the habit of doing, because we're trying to break the habit of when we feel a sensation, we generate a thought or a story. Um, so when we have a sensation particularly painful and we generate thoughts, we're creating an association between that sensation and that thought. And we don't necessarily realize that we're doing that. We don't necessarily realize that we're just feeling a sensation or a combination of sensations, and the theater of our mind is creating thoughts and stories that resonate with that sensation. And so, what this will end up doing is if we don't get this habit under control, then we're just going to be lost in our heads and we're going to be creating stories that are not true. And the reason they're not true is because no thought is true, no belief is true. Anything that we think is just something that's being created in our mind. And we may think, oh, I'm thinking about something that happened or what somebody did to me, and that's real. Right now, it's not real. The only thing that's real is we're sitting in our body, we're feeling our breath, and we're feeling the sensations in our body. The rest is just something the mind is creating. And so when we're feeling good, we're not thinking about these sorts of things. When we're feeling like really relaxed and happy, we're not thinking about these stories and thinking about these terrible circumstances we might think we're in or actually be in and all that stuff. Or we're not thinking about things we don't like about ourselves or about other people. When we're feeling good, we're feeling good. And if we're thinking thoughts, they're going to resonate with that good feeling. We're probably going to think good things. We're going to think optimistic thoughts, happy thoughts. So when we're constantly feeling sensations and unconsciously um, generating thoughts about the sensation basically, then it's easy to get lost. And especially if we're way up in our heads, we could really start to become convinced that these stories are true. But really what they are is a habit of a sensation and then a thought, a sensation and a story. And the more we have that sensation and create that story in tandem, the stronger and more real that thought or story is going to become to us. And yeah, I guess eventually we'll start manifesting that, or we'll start projecting that onto situations and other people and ourselves. And that's not necessarily true. So, the beauty of what eventually happens when we can continually come back to our body and the sensations in them, instead of feeling a sensation and thinking a thought, we stay with the sensation and then we feel another sensation. And we're, instead of, what's the word? Instead of, what's that word? It's such a easy word that I'm forgetting about it. Instead of associating a sensation and a thought, our mind associates sensations and thoughts together. Instead of doing that, we're associating sensations to other sensations in our body. And so, what that does is, as we continually come back to our body and feel sensations, instead of going into our head, we kind of start bouncing around to other sensations in the body, and we start to kind of rebuild our felt sense map of the body in space. I'm going to go into proprioception and that sort of stuff that's assisted by Salvia in the next video. But basically, when we relate a sensation in our body to another sensation in our body, it builds this kind of three-dimensional felt map of all the different sensations in our body. And the more we can break the habit of feeling sensation, thinking of a thought, the more we can just stay in our body instead and realize that whatever we're thinking is not true. And also just, instead of that energy leaking off into our thoughts, because I think that when we think and we're in our thoughts, that's taking up a lot of energy, like actual energy, physical energy. And instead of that energy going to our heads, that energy can be redirected back into our body, and the attention on our body and on the sensations, especially if they're painful, or they're sensations that require attention so that our body can understand how to process and heal them, basically, then more energy is going to go to that. And then we'll find that as we reinforce and strengthen this habit of staying in our body, even when we're feeling uncomfortable, especially when we're feeling uncomfortable and uncomfortable sensations, the more energy will be directed to just rebalancing our body and healing our body and bring us back into a feeling and felt sense of alignment and well-being. So that's pretty cool, right? So yeah, one quick little aspect of this is that there can be one particular painful sensation, and that could generate all kinds of thoughts, or there could be multiple combinations of sensations that, when we feel them together, like we might feel a painful sensation, and then we might feel this contraction, and then we might feel this kind of irritability like throughout our body. That is going to create, it's almost like that becomes our palette to paint these thoughts and stories. And so different combinations of sensations, and therefore states, because the sensations in our body, I think they're mostly what's dictating our state. And so different combinations of sensations or lack of sensations, if like we we kind of feel numb in areas and we can't feel certain areas, that's going to create certain resonant thoughts and stories with how that state feels. Um, so it's nothing to really, dwell on as far as like, am I feeling one sensation or multiple sensations? It's just something I've noticed, and it'll be a little bit more relevant when it comes to the salvia aspect of all this. Yeah, so I've already kind of talked about this, but I have this note here about sticky thoughts. So, particularly painful sensations, especially very painful sensations, when we come in contact with them, they can they can be very sticky in the sense that thoughts really stick to them. And so the habit of feeling that sensation and creating an instant thought, it could be it could be a thought maybe we've had 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times, and we just never really associated it with the sensation because we're so in our heads that we're not realizing that the story or thought that I'm thinking is not true. I'm just feeling something really intense in my body, and I'm jumping into the story about it. So these especially painful sensations can feel very sticky, and there's almost like a lot of density, and I don't think momentum is the right word, but there's a lot of what's that word? There's just a lot bundled up. It's like it's all tied up in knots because there's so much sensation and so many stories that it's almost like when we're feeling that particular sensation, it's just there's just these stories and there's just these thoughts, and it's hard to unravel and untangle it. We don't need to try to untangle it. We don't need to try to figure it out. We don't need to resolve the situation that we're thinking about during the meditation practice. That's um, that's a really common pitfall where when I'm meditating, I'll be feeling a feeling, and I'll be kind of lost in my thoughts about some situation or some story that I have in my head. And while I'm thinking of the story, I'm using my time to try to resolve the story or try to figure out, okay, what should I do here? What should I do to resolve this situation? Or what should I say to this person? Or what do I wish I said or did? That's not what we're doing here, because what it is that we're feeling a sensation. It's uncomfortable, and we want the sensation to go away. We're resisting the sensation. And so the ego's method of dealing with that sensation is trying to resolve the situation. But we're coming from a place of pain. We're coming from a state that's inherently limited in its perspective because we feel contracted. We feel kind of one dimensional in the sense that all we see is pain. Kind of like when someone's really angry, they can't think straight. We've all been there. We've all been angry. We've all seen people that are angry, and they're not thinking straight. They're lost in their head. They're really angry about whatever it is that they're thinking about, and they're in a particular state because their body is feeling a particular intense way. And the pitfall is to try to solve the problem of what you're thinking, when really what we need to be doing is just focusing on the sensation itself and just letting it be there, and just breathing and letting the sensation be there, and trusting that the body in its time will deal with and process the sensation as it needs to, as it can, and when it will. And so the solution to the problems that we think we're thinking is to just be with the sensation and let the sensation resolve itself by just being with it. And again, we're not trying to just be with it so that it will go away, because that's just another form of resisting it. And it's almost like it gives it more power to just be there, instead of just realizing that all sensations come and go, they arise and fall. And especially intense sensations, they have more density to them. They have more momentum. It's not the right word, but there's just more there, and there's just more density to just for the body to, ooh, I bumped that. There's just more density there for the body to process. And so yeah, just be with the sensation instead of trying to resolve the scenario in your head. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, instead of associating sensations with thoughts, we start to associate sensations with other sensations and kind of build a map of our body, no matter how uncomfortable it is, no matter how contorted it might feel, no matter how wrong it might feel. When we think something's wrong, we're going to think thoughts that feel wrong. We're going to think things in our life are wrong, and that's not a place to resolve those things. That's not a perspective or the type of like the level of awareness that we can resolve these problems from. We need to go to the core. The core is the sensations in the body and how the body is resisting or basically aversion and what's the other word? It's like, what's the opposite of aversion? It's just like clinging to the good sensations. So there's a habitual pattern going on, and the deepest level of the mind is the body. And so at the body level, there's sensations, and we're either resisting the sensations or we're not resisting them or we're clinging to them. And so what we want to do is just relax and just be with them all. And even if they feel good, just let them be there. If they feel bad, let them be there. And eventually, instead of associating sensations to thoughts, we'll start to associate sensations to other sensations. And we'll start to get the felt sense map of our body and be able to settle into that. And we're training ourselves to settle into even if it's uncomfortable. And so we'll reconstruct this map of our body without the habitual burden of constantly thinking thoughts and stories and trying to like solve these stories in our heads. When really all this is just built up pain in the body, and it just needs to be sat with and felt. And that's what we're going to do, and that's what we do. And so this is all going to lead into how does salvia facilitate all this, and how do we incorporate taking salvia with our meditation practice and all the different facets of how that's going to help. And so I'm going to get into that in this next video, and that might be the most exciting part. So I will see you soon.